Hey guys, check this out. Video coming up from Jay Shankar. Big ballet dancer, I call him, especially when he's seen between Love Raw and the Wang Yi. A ballet dancer. But he seems to be falling off. He's off his game. He seems to be falling off that high wire act that India's been trying to do. I think so, folks. I don't think he's got it right. What he's saying, hear it, then we talk about it.
It's an understood, accepted fact that you have the West, US-led, you have China as a next potential axis. Where does India fit into this? But are you planning to not take a side?
No, I'm sorry. That is exactly where I disagree with you. This is the construct you are trying to impose on me, and I don't accept it. I mean, I don't think it's necessary for me to join this axis or not, and if I'm not joining this, I must be with the other one. I don't accept that. I mean, I think I'm 1/5 of the world's population. I'm today the 5th or 6th largest economy in the world. I mean, forget the history, civilization bit. Everybody knows that. But I think I'm entitled to have my own side. I'm entitled to weigh my own interests, make my own choices, and my choices will not be cynical and transactional, but they will be a balance of my values and my interests. There is no country in the world which disregards its interests.
Folks, you must have heard Jay Shankar just about. Nice statement, ballet dancer. The lady's trying to fit India into a particular construct, US versus the rest. This seems to be the global thing to do, right? Generally, it's a written playbook, right? And he comes out and says, I'm on my own side, I don't choose, I choose to be on no one's side, but I'm driven by my own values and interests. Here, folks, is a question for you. I think he doesn't even know what his interest is. Because if he can be, if he's driven by domestic policy, which has forced us to give in to China, courtesy Love Raw. Here we have a policy that says we don't want any third-party intervention, and Russia is hogging up the cake with us, right? Forcing this ballet dancer to take sides. I think when you see what India has done with China, when we moved off the narrative of status quo ante and moved to this new narrative that's suddenly come up, which is like a gloop of saying we've given up the land. I say, folks, we've slipped a bit. We've slipped a lot, folks. And for Jay Shankar to come up with this, and we are not on this side or that side, I think the boys. Sad days are here, folks. Sad days are here, courtesy domestic policy. This conqueror has gone to the SEO. So it's very quite interesting, right? The invaders, the Mughal invaders came from the Central Asia, and now Modi has gone as a conqueror that way. But when you see the picture, and he's standing right in the corner, you know what we are there for. We are there to make people, the rest of them look good, because the rest of them are not singing at all well in the rest of the world, right? PM in Samarkand for first in-person SCO summit after COVID. Iranians deal to join SCO. Pak PM Sharif Putin hold pull aside. Russia values China's balanced position on Ukraine, opposes US provocation in Taiwan. Uzbekistan wants to act as a bridge. Okay, India can make its own decision. US on Vostok exercise. Right. The United States said, that's your call. We won't interfere. Like we are not interfering with the oil that you continue to buy despite our interests. But then, right, what's good for the goose, good for the gander. Biden admin announces support for Pak's F-16s. India registers strong protest with US over Pak F-16 package. US military to aid Pakistan raises alarms in India. Rajnath conveys concerns over US F-16 pack for Pak. But Putin, on the other hand, pipeline gas supplies to Pak, likely part of infra in place. And I don't know, like I said, what interest is good old Jay Shankar talking about when you have this Saudi beats Russia to become India's number 2 oil supply? Hey, what are the interests? Where's the confusion? And let me tell you this, folks, domestically, the impact of the oil from Russia is none. We've not gotten any discounts at the retail level, consumers, all the companies, all the corporate level. So what good is discounted oil from Russia? You can get the same goddamn thing, I think, from Iraq. So folks, quick readout of what's happening in this SCO meet, which is like being made a huge front page event. Back talks over Ukraine, Modi at event with Putin, PM to attend SCO summit in Uzbekistan. It happened, a turning point in the Ukraine conflict, and this is where he heads into this SCO where Putin has got the weakest hand that's been dealt to him. INSTC, Vladivostok links score of strategic ties with Russia. That's true. But on the other end, I'm not sure it's not so important for India as it is for Russia, folks. That's what should be important. Kyiv vows to liberate all its territory from Russia. Modi said to attend SCO summit in Samarkand with Xi Putin Shevas. Modi expected to meet Putin at SCO summit this week. 200 days of war, Ukraine advances, Russia retreats. That's when our good old champ is headed to the SCO. 49 soldiers die in attacks by Azerbaijan, Armenia. Another place where there is a huge setback for Russia, folks. Armenia asked Russia to help as 155 dead in Azerbaijan fighting. This is the confusion in our foreign policy, folks. Putin, Xi says, willing to work as great powers. One not so great, the other one not so great either. No word on bilaterals with Xi as PM Modi arrives at Samarkand. Thank God for that. That would be stupid for India to have been standing next to Xi, the guy who's in most of your territory right now. A lot of your territory. PM arrives for CEO summit. No word on bilateral. US a key partner in India's growth, says PM. This is the important statement he made luckily before heading to the SCO. India dismisses G7 oil price cap. Well, it shouldn't do that. First signs of friction. Putin admits China has concerns about Ukraine. Modi in Uzbek for SCO to meet Putin, Iran president. That's the important one. Not the era of war. Modi tells Putin amid Ukraine invasion. PM calls for reliable supply chain to boost recovery after pandemic. Supply chain, Russia and China, forget that. Modi and Raisi discuss energy and connectivity. This is a sudden meeting Turkey and Uzbekistan. Today's era, not a war. Modi to Putin. He's also meeting the Iranian fellow. But here is important why this SCO comes at just the wrong time for India, right? A setback for Moscow. All major powers are beginning to take a fresh look at the potential outcomes of the war and recalibrate their geopolitical calculus. India will not be an exception, says Raja Mohan. He writes, Ukraine key supporters in the war are start staring for the first time that it might be able to liberate most of the area occupied by Russian forces, including the Crimea. Okay. For Delhi, 5 broad dimensions will be worth a close watch. First is the nature of the debate in Moscow. All major wars have domestic political consequences for the belligerents, especially if you are losing or seen as losing by your own people. Second, Putin will soon have to make major decisions on recasting Russian military strategy. Persisting with the present policy is no longer a credible course. The third is the impact of the military setback in the Russian sphere of influence. A major aim of Putin's Ukraine war is to expand the Russian zone of influence in Eurasia. If Moscow is seen as failing in Ukraine, it could weaken the Russian influence where it is dominant now. That's the important for India to note. Fourth, Putin has bet that European dependence on Russian natural gas supplies will make it hard to sustain the initial United stand in favor of Ukraine. The Russian energy war was all set to shake up European politics, but the United States pressure could compel the Europeans to stay the course. Fifth, China will have to have some hard thinking to do as Russia struggles to regain the initiative in Ukraine. In the last few months, Delhi's focus has been on managing the economic consequences of the war in Ukraine and limiting its geopolitical impact on its security. But now that, folks, is beginning to change. Until this weekend, the consensus view was that the prolonged stalemate between the two sides is likely to endure and that any plan for terminating the war must come to terms with the reality. Ukraine's territorial gains in the last few days have made Kyiv's victory a real possibility. Russia has by no means lost the war in Ukraine, but it surely is losing ground. The probability of a Russian defeat in Ukraine may no longer be a trivial one, and that's for India to note, folks. So essentially, the confusion continues. Modi and Putin to discuss cooperation at G20, SCO and UN. UN, what is Russia going to offer? The only thing it has ever offered us is to stay quiet on Kashmir. That's about it. And G20, we want to be in the gallery with him? I don't think so. Xi to visit Central Asia to meet Russian counterpart? Well, he's going there as the boss man. Further de-escalation on agenda amid talks of Modi-Xi meet at SCO, and this is what it's all about for Xi. Well, let's not bank on it. And this is what I said. Disengagement has quietly become the nomenclature now for the ballet dancer instead of status quo ante. Lots of land grab has happened. China saves 2611 mastermind from UNSC terrorist designation. What else do you expect? India-China complete pullback at PP-15. India-China pullback troops from key points. India and Chinese troops complete disengagement in Hot Springs region. Disengagement set to be wrapped up today. India-China pushback amid Hot Springs retreat. India-China troops pull back from Gogra Hot Springs area. And this was all that was covering the news, right? As if it was like a big event for Modi. Modi achieved. Modi had the mumkin hai. Not so cool. Not so quickly, folks. Not so quickly. Despite bulge encroachment by PLA remains big problem for India. Army chief in Ladakh amid LAC cool off. And in Lanka, things continue to be in trouble. India calls out Lanka at UNHRC on Tamil issue. Thank God for that. That's your biggest asset. Sri Lanka crisis shows limits of debt-driven projects, says India. World Bank ready Sri Lanka aid package. IMF talks fruitful. But who is the guy who's throwing the roadblocks? China, folks, because it's refusing to acquiesce. India extends line of credit worth 1 billion to Lanka. China to help meet crucial needs Sri Lanka. Lanka may borrow from China to pay China off. Man, these Lankans, will they ever run or are they brain dead? Lankan trade unions on strike demanding Rajapaksa's ouster, and Rajapaksa, they're all back. Lankan FM to seek firming up of 1 billion credit line that was with India. Not a happy Lanka can't. India's claim of replacing Chinese influence in crisis hit Lanka is going to be a serious challenge. China is probably waiting for Sri Lanka to slip further into an economic mire, resulting in opportunities for converting debt into ownership of prized assets. UK, Canada issue advisories for Lanka amid forex crisis. Sri Lankan students mock PM's. This is all in the past, right? As economic crisis worsens, 2 men die in queue for fuel. Lanka PM Rajapaksa says won't resign, will also head interim government. And that's the problem, folks. That's the problem. All the corrupt politicians, F all these countries. That's the game plan of China, essentially, right? Concerns over US presence in Nepal, China's ends 4-day trip. The United States presence in Nepal is critical, and it has India's acceptance. Beyond China, why SCO is key. The PM's presence in Samarkand shows India is engaging with the world on its own terms. And like I said, what are its own terms, as I want to know? Just that we can buy Russian oil, just that we've got S-400. If we were, let's put it this way, folks, if the United States was to use its katsa, India's economy would be dead and gone, and so would also all these guys who continue to talk about balancing and balancing and balancing. We all know the actions in the Indo-Pacific, and in the Indo-Pacific construct, California becomes a critical hotspot for technology, for funds. In other words, California as an economy is bigger than India's, right? That's something to remember. So when you read this, airport container depot, township in 16,610 hectare of pristine Nicobar clear, you know we're on the right track. But what you really need here is a confluence of all the Pacific nations. In that, because domestically we have trouble. Foreign companies struggle to meet tech specs of submarine plans. Well, that's what you have. India, Japan to step up cooperation in defense and emerging technology. This is why even this Nicobar development gets important. You really need to bring in, besides Japan, this. Amid drills with Japan, India ships also in Australia for working. Get Australia in. PM Lord's trust role in boosting Indo-UK ties. Get United Kingdom in. United Kingdom historically has been the biggest player in this region, understands it. India, France agree to strengthen ties in Indo-Pacific area. Get France in. French minister shares concerns over Indo-Pacific. India, France work on trilateral project cooperation in Indo-Pacific. And then the United States and the CHIPS Act. Biden plans fresh curbs on US chip exports to China, and at the same time you're having Foxconn and Vedanta, then you have TMIC with another company in Tamil Nadu. Goyal launches Setu to connect Indian startup with guess who? US investors. When everything's at the US, you have Modi running to a non-consequential SCO, trying to pretend it's the next big thing, and we are doing the right thing, independent foreign policy. But the action is where Goyal is. Rajnath's also been there. Goyal pitches for India's story in the US. India to join 3 or 4 IPEF pillars, leaves out the most important one. IPF will tackle new economic challenges that FTA doesn't, says the United States. India joins US-led Indo-Pacific group. US hopes IPF meeting kicks off globalization 2.0. What made India stay out of Indo-Pacific trade pillar? Green and Labour riders made the government wary, but it should be. It should be going in with confidence. We'll continue IPF trade talks with an open mind, says Goyal. And don't be afraid of IPF, says Pradeep S. Mehta. By joining all pillars of the Indo-Pacific bloc, India can only do its trade ambition, the world of good. Knock on the door and join, he says. A coherent trade policy should not just help enhance competitiveness and export, but also stimulate reforms and help achieve other national development goals. Indo-Pacific, where the West meets the East, important. He says the politics and policies of Washington DC will of course shape state-to-state ties, as will the power of financial capital in New York, but the strategic, technological, economic and diaspora dimensions of bilateral ties are all playing out on the West Coast. The strategic story is straightforward. If the future of global geopolitics lies in the Indo-Pacific, the US's claim of being an Indo-Pacific power come from its western geography, from the ongoing geopolitical contest in the South Pacific Islands to the almost inevitable future clash with Taiwan. The US will have to bring the power of its West Coast into play to preserve its dominance. If the US has to look to its west to succeed in the Indo-Pacific, India has to extend its Act East policy to the American West Coast to ensure its place on the global stage. It is here that the West and the East will meet to take on the China challenge. Absolutely. Goyal goes to San Fran, right? Seema Sirohi. Piyush Goyal's visit to California last week was primarily aimed at generating more investment for India. His pitch to foreign investors and tech titans, a new can-do spirit has taken over India and its markets they can't afford to miss. But one might legitimately ask, if you don't participate in the trade segment, how can you shape the negotiations? It is unclear whether an Indian official sitting in the room as an observer can make interventions while others talk and take the trade in a certain direction. Important to note. So the other consequential relationship for India to counter China and for the Indo-Pacific to work is the Indo-Japan, right? So Kishida calls for open Indo-Pacific. India, Japan unveils plans for first Air Force exercise. Faced with expansionist China, India and Japan unite for free Indo-Pacific. Japan seeks stronger security ties with India at 2+2. Meet says global order is under strain. Tokyo-Delhi Compact by Sujan Choi. The important part here, folks, is to note, Indo-Japan ministerial dialogue points to deepening of strategic and defense partnership. And I think it's about time co-development of big platform. India will host G20 in September next year under its own presidency. Important thing that's happening here. India pitches for Saudi investments in energy, IT, defense and manufacturing. India-Saudi ties promise shared growth, security, stability, says Jai Shankar. Absolutely. India-Saudi ties focus on shared growth, says EAM. But here's why we should take our eyes off. Why India should not avert its eyes from Iraq. Iraq, our largest source of crude, is in the series of existential paroxysms. Although India has been relatively passive in Iraq for nearly 3 decades, we need to act now to leverage the goodwill we enjoy among Iraqis. We could help them to set up credible and effective institutions for governance, shore up civil society, and mitigate poverty. We also need to boost our exports to redress the mushrooming trade deficit, perhaps by negotiating a bilateral free agreement. Important, and this is the other good thing. India-Iranian deal on port in Chabad. This is important if the nuclear deal comes through. Modi and Iranian President Raisi may hold meet on SCO sidelines, which they did. Jai Hind. Well, it's a fairly confused policy. All the stuff that Jai Shankar said right on the top, to my mind, BS at best. Jai Hind.